All right, so we're going to go over matter, specifically how we classify matter. So what is matter? Matter is anything that has mass or volume, mass and volume. So volume is something that takes up space. So when we classify it, we can classify it into two different categories. One is a pure substance. So a pure substance is matter that is uniform and unchanging. But the biggest thing is it can't be physically separated. So usually it's chemically bonded together. And so when we think of examples of pure substances, like water is an example. It's uniform, unchanging. If you had carbon dioxide, so it cannot be physically separated. Okay? Well, the other option, so one is pure substance. Mixtures are ones that can be physically separated. So this can be physically separated. So examples would be like salt water. You could physically remove the water by evaporating, and left over you'll have salt. Air is an example of a mixture. Really common ones like salad, that kind of stuff, but air is a common one. You can actually separate the gases by their weight. So just to recap, what is matter? And matter has two types, and it's based off can they be physically separated. So if you can physically separate, so physical separate, if the answer is no, then it is a pure substance. And if you can physical, it's a mixture. So our first division is matter can either be a mixture or a pure substance. So next I'm going to talk about pure substances. So pure substance can be divided into two more categories: elements and compounds. So an element is a pure substance that cannot be separated into a simpler substance. So this is as simple as it gets. And we can always find this on the periodic table. So all elements are found on the periodic table. So examples are like hydrogen, aluminum. So oftentimes look for, like, if it has a symbol, then it's most likely an element. A symbol usually is, like, for example, hydrogen, the symbol has a uppercase letter, and then sometimes they'll have a lowercase second letter. The other option is a pure substance could be a compound, and that's when you combine two or more different elements and they're bonded chemically. So it means they're attached chemically. And so an example would be like CO2, which is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide has two elements, carbon and oxygen. So notice you have two uppercase letters. Why? Because you have carbon with oxygen, so that means there are two elements. Okay. All right. Okay, and now if you go to the other side of the flow chart, we have mixtures. And so there's two types of mixtures. One is called homogeneous, and the other one is heterogeneous. So the prefix homo means the same, and then hetero means different. And if you remember from biology, there was heterozygous and homozygous. So when we did genetics, and so homogeneous means it's uniform or the same throughout. And another name for homogeneous is solution. Heterogeneous means it's not blended smoothly throughout, so you can see the individual substances, right? So, for example, in this, if this, say, was salt water, this would be homogeneous because you couldn't tell the difference between the water and the salt, whereas this is heterogeneous, and this is heterogeneous as well. Why? Because you can actually see the different parts of the mixture. Now, if we go into further detail with heterogeneous, remember heterogeneous means it's not uniform, or you can see the different parts, so hetero means different. So heterogeneous mixtures can either be a suspension or a colloid. So the option is a suspension is when you have larger particles that settle out over time. Colloid is same as a suspension but has smaller sized particles. So suspension might look like where the particles are bigger, and I'm going to exaggerate, but the particles are bigger that are found in here, so you might see them floating, right? Whereas a colloid, it might appear homogeneous. Why? Because the particles are smaller, but we would still call them heterogeneous. So let me make this a little bigger. And this might help actually to understand it further. So this is called a colloid. And then a homogeneous mixture would be even smaller. So like, let me do this here. So you see how the particles are a little bigger for colloid? And then for a solution, this is an example of solutions. These are all mixtures. And so a solution, this is homogeneous. These, with your eye, you can't see the difference. And in colloid, you might not be able to see the difference. But these are both heterogeneous. So there's two types of heterogeneous mixtures. Okay? All right. So the question is, with your naked eye, it's really hard to tell the difference between these two, colloid and solution. It's really hard. So there's a test we can run. The test is called the Tyndall effect, where you flash light through the mixture. And so if the light just passes through without shining, what happens is, in a solution, what happens is the light passes through. And the reason is because the particles are so small that the light can, let me make it orange, the light can pass straight through. But if you have, in a colloid, even though your eye can't see it, let me make this a little bigger. So let's say that's too big. Let's say the particles were a little bigger. What happens is, when you pass light through it, okay, some of it will go through, but what will happen is some of it will hit the particles because they're a little bigger, so they're easier to hit, and they'll bounce. And so what happens is it almost looks like the light is scattering, and it almost looks like the whole mixture is lighting up. Why? Because what's happening is the light is bouncing off the particles, the bigger particles, and so therefore the light is going in different directions within that mixture. And so it looks like that, it lights up. And so a really common example of colloid is milk, fog. Those are examples. Okay? And this is called the Tyndall effect when you put light through it. So let's put this all together because I think that this will be helpful. So anything that has mass and volume is called matter. All right? If you can physically separate, so let's say, yes, you can physically separate the matter, or no, you cannot, you get a mixture. If you can't physically separate it, it's what we call a pure substance. there are two types of pure substances. The first type of pure substance is the pure substance can either be an element or a compound. And so a pure substance means the pure substance is either, so what is the question we can ask with a pure substance? Is it, so a compound would have two or more elements bonded, whereas an element is single. It's a single element, but it's a single uniform substance. It can't be broken down further. Let's say it cannot be broken down. Alright, so let's get into the mixture part. So mixture can either be heterogeneous or homogeneous. So heterogeneous or homogeneous. So the question you can ask, is it uniform? Meaning, is it the same? So is it uniform? So if it is uniform, so here's the yes answer. If it is uniform, it's homogeneous. Another name for homogeneous is solution. If it's not uniform, then it's heterogeneous. And heterogeneous can either be a colloid, which is a smaller particle, and a mixture. So a colloid would be it would have a smaller particle, and then a suspension would be a larger particle. Alright. Okay, and then here we have types of matter. So this would be an element. Why? Well, look, they have a single, so they're all uniform and they're single. These would be mixtures. Take a look, they have two different items. And then lastly, these would be compounds. You can see that there are two yellow or two pink chemically connected to the green, whereas you have this here, but there's separation. There's physical separation. Look, two purples and two pinks. Okay? All right.